Welcome to the final days. Today is February 15, 2020. Today we are going to see what is being hidden by all the atmospheric chemical spraying worldwide. All of the images you are about to see were taken by the Alaskan and Canadian FAA weather cameras over the past few days. These images are unedited except where obvious contrast is used to facilitate viewing of the details. The purpose of this channel is to show viewers that we are living in the very last days according to the Holy Bible, and what to do about it, and why this is actually good news. Explain later in this video. Our first video starts out at Clark's Point, Alaska, around noon local time. The reason that this image is important is because the celestial object being hidden is behind the clouds right now. We know this can't be a lens flare. For those new to this channel, I'll quickly touch on the 4 elementary facts about lens flares. 1. Lens flares of the sun don't rotate. Our sun only rotates once every 27 Earth days. 2. Lens flares of the sun don't contain craters and heavily textured surfaces. 3. Lens flares cannot go behind clouds or other structures in a video or picture. 4. Lens flares of the sun can never react to sunlight in a video. For example, a lens flare can never become partially illuminated by the object causing the lens flare. Please remember these fundamental facts as we go through these FAA videos. As I've mentioned before, the contrast is applied to only a small portion of the image in order to be more effective. I try not to include any glare, clouds, or sun in the contrast areas so that it works best that way. Untold trillions have been spent to hide this inbound planetary system from the unknowing masses. The reason for the deception is because the enemies of Christ do not want you to know how close to the end we are, nor do they want you to turn your life over to Jesus while you still have time. Information is at the end of this video instructing you on how to accept Christ into your life. Our next video of a solar eclipse came from the south-facing weather camera located in Kasson, Alaska. The atmospheric chemicals are very effective at hiding enormous celestial objects. Some contrast applied to a small part of the image helps to see what's being hidden. The objects hidden in these videos are part of a planetary system that will be making its closest pass to Earth during the biblically foretold time of the Great Tribulation, which is described in detail in the Bible's book of Revelation, and which may be upon us now. As this system approaches, volcanic and seismic activity will continue to increase from its gravitational effects. My next video will contain an update on the upcoming mid-May cosmic event this year, brought by this inbound planetary system. Jesus describes the last days in Luke chapter 21, verse 25, when he says that we will see these signs in the sky when the end is near. As Christians, we are commanded to watch for these signs and wonders, signaling the end of the age, so that we are not ignorant of the very late hour in which we are living, and so that we can be spiritually prepared for what lies ahead and help others become spiritually prepared. Several months ago, Homeland Security instructed all citizens to have a 6-month supply of food and water on hand. This is good advice and is one way for you and your family to prepare for the power outages and quarantines that are coming. This map highlights the weather camera in Buffalo Narrows, Saskatchewan in Canada. These images will show the viewers that something is wrong with the sun. Something's just not right. Local time here is nearly 11 in the morning, and we see what looks like an ordinary day. But 10 minutes later, the sky and landscape suddenly darken. We know this isn't the camera acting up because both the sky and the landscape become dark. Take a look at the snow in the foreground. It's bright in one image, and then 10 minutes later, it's much darker. After we see a few examples of this, I'll show why this is happening. In Shamattawa, Manitoba in Canada, the sun appeared bright and large, and then 10 minutes later it shrunk to 1/3 the size as the landscape and sky became dark also. If we simply count screen pixels, we see in this image that the sun is 422 screen pixels in diameter. The radius was used because not all of the sun is visible at the horizon. The diameter is 2 times the radius, so the radius of the circular glare is 211 pixels, which means the diameter is 422 screen pixels. Just 10 minutes later, it almost looks like nighttime as the sun suddenly shrinks down to 1/4 of its previous size in just minutes ago. The diameter of the sun is now only 108 screen pixels, about 1/4 the size it was just 10 minutes ago. We see the same thing happening in Moosonee, Ontario. All of these images are 10 minutes apart. Notice how bright the snow is in the foreground, and then how dark it is after the sun shrinks. The 10-minute change in the light source is dramatic, despite the heavy saturation of atmospheric chemicals. The same thing is happening in Casablanca, Ontario. And then again we see the same thing at Big Trout Lake in Ontario. Here is the telling video for the sky suddenly dimming. This footage is from Chilkat, Alaska. I'll play this exactly as it came off the camera. Notice how the sky in one frame goes from blue to gray in only 10 minutes. In one frame the sky is actually bright blue. Then in the next frame it almost looks like a black and white photo as the sky went completely gray without a cloud in the sky. It's a perfectly cloudless day. Even though there are no clouds, the atmospheric chemicals are still there. And in the frame just before the sky turns gray, a large celestial object starts to come into view. Thus, the dimming of NASA's light source completely hides this object from view, so that even with contrast, it's nearly impossible to see. NASA's circular glare is very adjustable and can be turned up and down as needed in order to hide the inbound planetary system. We'll see an example of this in just a minute. And then also in just a minute we will be seeing what is actually producing that circular glare. Some of you have seen these images from Scammon Bay, where the sun appeared to grow to an enormous size in just a very short period of time. The enormous glare is very effective at engulfing nearby celestial objects in glare to conceal them from view. Some of you have seen this footage in a previous video taken from the camera at the Joint Military Base just outside Anchorage. As you can see in this footage, look at the bottom right corner. There are 2 enormous celestial objects being approached by the setting sun. NASA's manufactured light engulfs these objects in its glare in an attempt to hide them from view. The equipment that produces this large glare is relatively small, as you can see in these early morning images from Canada. These are from last month, so the sun is just skidding along the horizon and it won't rise very high that day. If the angle of the camera is perfectly lined up with the angle of the glare-producing equipment, which normally sets what looks like the center of the sun. It's actually in the center of the big glare. Then it shows up as a black dot, which casts a reflection upon the water surfaces, proving that it's an actual piece of equipment and not a camera or lighting issue. However, there are some problems with this artificial light. If the sun is being eclipsed and NASA's light is the dominant light source in the sky, the circular glare completely disappears when the light source goes behind a tiny object, such as this street lamp. Our real sun could never be hidden behind a small object like this, but it's currently not visible because it's being eclipsed by an object that we will see in just a minute. For the same reason, NASA's small glare-producing equipment also disappears completely behind a thin flagpole, because the real sun is currently being eclipsed. Ignore the vertical lens flare in these images, which are typical of many Canadian FAA cameras. As you can see, the sun appears to completely disappear behind a tiny bird feeder post. This is an impossibility with our real sun. All of these images prove that we are living in the very last days, according to the Holy Bible. Unfortunately, there's another problem with NASA's light source. It also lights up what's behind it. The sun appears to suddenly shrink down to 1/5 its size as the real sun goes behind a mammoth structure in space, and NASA's artificial light passes in front of this object. The sky and landscape become very dark because NASA's light is no match for the real sun. And as you can see, NASA's light passes over this highly textured object, lighting it up. Of course, it would be absolutely ludicrous for us to think that we could actually see something like this behind our real sun, 93 million miles away, with the naked eye. But NASA's light is much, much closer. It's very close to the Earth, and it does light up what's behind it, as you can see here. These images from Cheakamus Canyon were taken 5 days ago. The video begins in the morning with 2 different light sources rising up from behind a mountain range. Technology is in place to blur sky objects and bend light. We see more than one object rising up in the morning. Look at the blurry patches in the foreground. Those are not in the camera. They are created in real time by the camouflaging optics in the sky. In one of my previous videos, I showed a seasonal comparison of these blurry patches, and they actually move with the changing position of the sun as we go through the seasons. So when the sun rises up farther to the left side of the screen, then these blurry patches move right along with them, and they always stay under the 2 rising objects. Just imagine the trillions of dollars that are spent to hide this approaching system could have been used instead to cure diseases, feed the hungry, educate poor countries, help the impoverished, and remove pollution from our air and water. This video from Buffalo Narrows in Saskatchewan shows an odd structure in the sky. We know it can't be a lens flare, and it can't be anything on the camera lens or on the housing, because this structure actually goes behind the clouds in some of these images. So remember our rules about lens flares. They cannot go behind clouds or other structures in a picture. Another clue that this structure is really out there in the sky is that the craft is near it. This craft is only in images where concealment is occurring. We don't see the craft if nothing is being hidden. I don't have labels for these things, but I can tell you that these are signs that we are living in the very last days according to the Holy Bible. But all of this is actually good news, because Jesus has promised to remove his faithful followers from earth before God's wrath is unleashed upon the earth. This is commonly called the rapture, which will take place quickly and quietly. The New King James Version of Luke chapter 21 verse 36 reads, "Watch therefore and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass." Jesus is referring to God's wrath in the very last of days. He is saying that those who are counted worthy will escape all of God's wrath. The Bible repeatedly promises that faithful followers of Christ are not appointed to God's wrath. To be counted worthy, we must be living in holiness. A link in the description box below discusses what holiness is and how to achieve it. Your eternal soul was sent into this world, into this temporary flesh body that you have, in order to learn how to love Christ and live according to that love. This is the only reason you are here. It's not enough to simply hold an opinion that Jesus is the Son of God who died on a cross. Even Satan knows that. Many people mistakenly believe that there is a fourth or fifth dimensional ascension for good people, or that all good people automatically go to heaven. This is a lie from the demonic realm. Heaven is only available to those who have accepted Jesus into their hearts and lives. People often ask, why wouldn't a good person go to heaven? Bill Weiss gives a great analogy of why simply being good doesn't get a person into heaven. Let's say you walk up to the door of the finest house in the country. You knock on the door. When the owner opens the door, you say, "I'm a good person. I'm moving in." The house owner says, "I don't know you. Go away." Well, it's the same with heaven. You can't just live your whole life without knowing, trusting, and living for Christ, and then one day go knocking on heaven's door expecting to enter. Living for Christ is much more than holding an opinion that he is God and that he died on a cross. You must make him the center of your life. These next few screens will tell you how to accept Christ into your life. Simply pause the screens if you need more time to read the text.